us to talk about something of a vibe shift that's happening right now in politics.
If you drain Christianity of the teachings of Jesus, I'm not even sure what it is. Today's conservative Christians are not committed enough to homophobia and anti-abortion politics.
But both sympathy and empathy can be harmful. Both can be destructive, but especially empathy.
As a man, you should not strive to be more empathetic. In fact, it's actually a feminine trait.
Empathy untethered to biblical truth is bad.
Toxic empathy. Turn away more refugees. Turn away more refugees while boasting of your piety.
Jesus didn't come to comfort people in their sin. Jesus came in compassion to confront people in their sin. You want to get people ticked off, just tell them they shouldn't be empathetic.
Hello and welcome to Unreligiously. My name is Lauren, and today we're going to be talking about something that has been really making waves in Christian circles lately. It's something that might surprise you, whether you come from an evangelical household, a religious household growing up, or whether you came from a secular household, a household that does not adhere to religion. Today we are going to be talking about empathy. This is something that's been really, really upsetting people in certain Christian spaces, particularly toxic empathy. This isn't real empathy. This is not the kind of empathy that actually sits with people in their pain and tries to understand them and loves others. This is not the type of empathy that creates room for complexity. This is not the type of empathy that actually wants to challenge systems that harm people on a regular basis. This is toxic empathy, which is a very specific, weaponized version of empathy, according to them. It's empathy that looks like empathy or compassion on the surface, but underneath it, it's actually used to manipulate, to control, and for other people to stay in power. That's what we're going to be talking about today. It sounds like this isn't something that people are really talking about that often. Unfortunately, the reality is that they are.
Empathy and inclusion are the values that have sucked so many people, especially young people, especially women, and especially Christian women, into accepting ideas and policies that are actually very harmful. And they are harming the very people that these groups say that they want to defend, the most vulnerable, particularly women and children.
I think this is a really important discussion to have because this is something that probably would have thrown me off when I was growing up in the church, because I'm someone that is empathetic. I would like to think that I'm a very empathetic person. And I think if you grow up being an empathetic person, you also, everyone has to learn emotional boundaries as well, and learning, okay, maybe I have empathy for this person, but I do also need to focus on myself right now, and not get, swept up or, not take care of my own needs because I'm taking care of other people. You have to learn these types of boundaries. And so I do think that you can, maybe if empathy turns into codependency, but I don't think that empathy on its own is something that's toxic. But that's really what we're talking about today. Toxic empathy, and how this is becoming a trend on social media, how Christians are using this to fuel a conservative rhetoric, and that it's even a missions strategy inside churches in evangelical culture. This is something that hurts many different groups of people.
Of empathy, or caring about other people's feelings, as a good thing. But in some conservative circles, there's a growing chorus of voices arguing that empathy could be bad.
Empathy almost needs to be struck from the Christian vocabulary.
It does.
Empathy is dangerous. Empathy is toxic. Empathy will align you with hell.
Empathy, as hoisted up as the highest virtue, or even a virtue at all, I think that really gets us into a really big mess.
Most people have a hard time imagining how empathy could ever be harmful. And therefore, if I'm the devil, where am I going to hide some of my most destructive tactics?
This is emotional marketing that they're using to keep down different groups of people, and we'll get into that more later. But this whole concept of toxic empathy, in my opinion, is racist, it's homophobic, it's sexist. We'll get into all of this more, but it's not just about emotional boundaries. Like I just mentioned to you guys, it's about so much more than that. And it really is, in my opinion, it's the foundation of this is actually hate, not love, not empathy, not anything that Jesus promoted.
It leads us to make stupid and evil decisions. It blinds us to both reality and morality. So if we feel so much of what someone else feels, which is what empathy means, that we've placed ourselves in their shoes and we feel everything that they feel, that our feelings have driven us to affirm lies, to validate or honor sin, or to support policies that are destructive, that's when our empathy has turned toxic.
You guys already probably have figured out that this is my opinion, but I do want to start out this video by saying really clearly that empathy in and of itself is not the problem, right? It doesn't take somebody who is like, I don't know, a psychologist to figure that out. Empathy is not the problem here. Empathy is necessary, and it's something that I think that we could actually use more of. It's something that makes us human and allows us to connect with each other. And honestly, I think that a world with people that were more empathetic and were engaging with that side of themselves would be a happier, more peaceful world. But what happens when empathy is completely stripped of any accountability and is used for manipulation? What if it's detached from any sense of justice or a moral framework? What happens when empathy is used selectively for a specific group of people who act in a specific way, look a specific way, and vote a specific way? That's where it turns toxic.
You know, there's this natural instinct to be empathetic, and that's all good. But we must follow the rules that are set out for us in the Bible. And so, for example, she has a whole chapter on homosexuality.
Oh, yeah.
Christian nationalist culture, which is running rampant right now in the United States, empathy has started to become less about understanding other people and loving your neighbors, and a lot more about making hate palatable for the average Christian.
Of pain causes us to deprioritize objective facts, but it also causes us to deprioritize or abandon biblical truth. Like, doesn't empathy just mean putting yourself in someone else's shoes, trying to understand how someone feels, to comprehend their position so you can listen to them, learn from them, and then potentially, if necessary, advocate on their behalf? Like, what could be wrong with that? Isn't empathy what helps us be less judgmental and kinder to people? And then inclusion, how could that be bad? What's wrong with trying to bring more people into the fold, making sure more people feel seen and heard? Shouldn't we, especially as Christians, be creating a more inclusive and empathetic society? Like, isn't that what Jesus would want? Isn't that loving people, loving your neighbor as yourself? The answer is, though, I've realized over time and after some thought and some reading and some investigation that the answer is actually no. The answer is no. Not only should we not be prioritizing empathy and inclusion in our own lives, prioritizing, I mean every word. So make sure that you're listening to what I'm saying. I'm not saying, as I will talk about, that we shouldn't care about these things at all, but we should not be prioritizing empathy and inclusion in our lives. We also shouldn't be pursuing these as top societal values.
I think that in general, the average Christian does want to be a good person. They want to help others. They do try to love their neighbors. But when you have somebody from the pulpit telling you that what you're doing isn't really empathizing, it isn't really love, it's actually sinful, it's actually enabling, then that's where it gets complicated. So I think that the average person is not engaging with this, but the average person is being taught this in evangelical spaces.
And this isn't just my opinion, this is basic social psychology. Empathy is good for caring for others, for nurturing others, like being a mother, caring for an innocent, helpless baby. That's a good thing. And yes, in general, it can be good to understand what people are going through, why they're doing the things they are, because that can help you determine how to deal with them appropriately. To that degree, yeah, some empathy is good. But that's about the extent of it. Beyond that, you need masculine traits like self-reliance, assertiveness, competition, confrontation. Those values are actually the ones that help build and protect a society. Men build society. In fact, when you have too much empathy, you end up with weak, non-confrontational men. You get a society like the one we have now. That is the work of empathy. And it's because men have become afraid to say, no, I don't want to be empathetic. I want to do what's right. And to hell with those who don't.
You guys have probably seen videos or posts on Instagram or on Facebook with Christians talking about loving people as they are or loving the sinner but hating the sin. People might have podcasts about trying to have more grace for the other side and trying to see where they come from. And you might have Christian influencers who actually do try to talk to you about discipleship and things like that. You might even have churches that say they promote non-judgmental spaces or LGBTQ plus inclusion, but only as long as you eventually turn out like them, only if you end up conforming. All of it feels like empathy with a massive agenda.
Empathy, if it leads to comforting people in their sin, is itself a sin. This is the demonic stronghold of our day.
100%.
This isn't the first time this has happened. This is what has brought every culture down, the Greco-Roman culture, Persian Empire. There is a demonic blindness that comes with this. One of the ways the blindness comes is through this word empathy. We would say, no, Jesus was never empathetic in how we're defining empathy today. And how we would define empathy today is empathy that's not tethered to truth.
Right.
So it's like, you're down in the mud. Oh my goodness. Let me get down in the mud with you. End of story. Rising with someone is putting their feelings as ultimate paramount truths and then enabling them to continue in those feelings no matter how destructive they are. And that is not Christian. The difference is compassion. Distinctly Christian compassion is I love you, I feel for your pain, I'm moved by your pain, I'm willing to step down with you into your pain for the sake of helping you get out of your pain when that pain is caused by explicitly sin. Feelings aren't ultimate and won't determine what we do here. Truth is, because empathy, if it leads to comforting people in their sin, is itself a sin. And we've watched parents do this, in particular, mothers do this, where they get sucked into empathy for their child, no matter what their child thinks, does, or says. And the dad's like, because he can often be governed more by facts than feelings. And he's not sure what to think, but the mom starts like, well, what would Jesus do? And it's doing this whole apostate Jesus juke on the dad. And the dad gets sucked in. And now mom and dad are in church following their kids away from Jesus.
It has conditions associated with it, which to me turns it from empathy to something else entirely. We don't need to barter for your emotional validation. Once again, this isn't all Christians, but in my opinion, this type of Christian empathy is dangerous. It comes with a lot of strings attached. The point is, the churches might say these things, but in general, if you actually take a close look at who they platform, who they let speak, who they feature on their social media, and what people are stuck on parking committee and greeting committee, and what people are allowed to even speak, what people aren't allowed to speak, when you look at that, it starts to become a lot more clear about what type of message they're okay promoting and what kind of people they're actually welcoming towards.
I'm getting tired of people telling me that I don't have empathy for people being deported, people having to pay back their student loans, and people being shot by the police. I am not empathetic towards people who made a decision knowing the consequences and were given an alternative route that could have prevented it.
If anybody gets upset about being less than, considered less than, not being allowed to serve, then they're considered being bitter, that they're confused, or that they're not willing to put in the hard work to get right with God so that they can be in a position where they are worthy of serving God. What's the most disturbing to me about all of this is that the empathy rarely extends to people of color, immigrants, or queer people.
The fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy.
That's billionaire Elon Musk speaking recently on the podcast The Joe Rogan Experience. They were discussing the idea that unchecked immigration into Western countries is threatening Western political and cultural values. Musk agrees and warns that societies are at risk of self-destructing.
There's so much empathy that you actually suicide yourself.
Yeah.
So that we've got civilizational suicidal empathy going on.
Musk said empathy can be good, but it's too often weaponized to persuade well-meaning people to support bad ideas.
There are a million other groups that we can talk about here, and I don't want to minimize it, but Honestly, there are so many groups that this is harmful towards. So fill in the blank yourselves. If this is a group that the church historically wouldn't have empathy towards, this is a group that I'm probably talking about in this video. But specifically, we have to talk about the homophobia and the racism in this video, because to me, that is one of the biggest reasons why they're framing empathy as toxic and why it's becoming such a political talking point.
French says Jesus, the central figure in Christianity, embodied empathy by coming to earth as a man and enduring the human experience.
For example, empathy doesn't extend to queer people unless they're trying to be cisgender and straight. We've seen it all before, and unless you're seeking out a church that is, like, that's one of their main marketing points, is that they are an affirming church. Even if a church says they're welcoming and accepting, they probably aren't. We've been over this before in my videos, but you're not actually allowed to serve, right? You're allowed to sit and walk in the pews. You're allowed to donate, but you're not actually going to be allowed to serve. You're not going to be allowed to speak. Unless you make those changes, right? Unless you make those changes to where they would consider you to not be living in sin anymore, then you're not going to be allowed to speak. And if you do make those changes, then they're going to pimp out your testimony like no other. This empathy also doesn't extend to single mothers. We've seen it in the video that I made for you guys about Nikali, I've seen it pronounced both ways, who called churches asking if they would help feed her starving baby. And Christians, instead of understanding that the church's saying no was appalling and why that was appalling to people, they focused on the fact that Nikali didn't really have a starving baby, and so she lied, and so she committed the first wrong, and so the church not being willing to step up and help in that situation, not their problem, not their fault, she lied first. Some are even arguing that it's just their discernment and that they don't need to be empathetic towards those groups of people. Women leaving abusive marriages, are they getting this same empathy? No, I would argue no. I've seen it myself in my own life. It doesn't extend to the whistleblowers who call out abuse in churches, and it does not extend to immigrants or people of color, even the ones who are donating to those very churches. It rarely extends to victims.
The whole anti-empathy movement in evangelicalism, when you drill down on it, is motivated by seeing some Christians promoting progressive causes because we care about people. If you care about people to the point where you would agree with a progressive solution, you've left acceptable behavior for what? For a Christian? For our tribe, you know, and that's when you boil down like Basham's book, what it really is, it's about political tribalism. Right. It's like these people who call themselves Christians are not loyal to our right-wing political tribe, and therefore they must be shamed.
It's funny where they want empathy to be shown and where they don't, because empathy almost always extends to people like abusive pastors who get shuffled around from church to church without ever being reported, or male leaders who have fallen in some sort of major way, yet are still allowed to serve while the dedicated queer man is stuck in the parking lot. It extends to white straight men who say they love God but then cheat on their wives and abuse their children but then go crying on podcasts about it. It extends to Christian institutions who need to just learn and grow and hear the voice of God to catch up with society today. It extends to the perpetrators of abuse, essentially, not the victims, and that is clear. That's so clear. We have to be honest. Is the empathy here about people, or is it about protecting systems of control and power? The answer is obvious. It's about appearing as good as you can in public while still maintaining a corrupt system. And that is the real toxic empathy. It's not the empathy that they're calling toxic, which the world needs more of. Because toxic empathy doesn't help to set people free. Toxic empathy doesn't raise up victims of abuse or try to dismantle systems that are abusive. Toxic empathy uplifts abuse. right? It doesn't let those things go. And this is where they get it twisted.
People, I think, are tired of feeling guilty, and they have been very open to the idea that empathy or compassion is a weakness. Am I completely off base here? Are you guys seeing this? And if so, like, when and where did you notice it happening?
You kind of always had this like back and forth about who's really thinking analytically here versus who's emoting. But that's an old thing. What's happening now is, I think, more specific to the Trump phenomenon, and I'm especially seeing it in evangelical spaces. They're taking on the very notion of empathy itself, calling empathy, for example, a sin, or talking about toxic empathy. And you talk about like the predicament of a refugee fleeing Afghanistan, or the predicament of kids cut off from help from USAID. And then the response to that is, this is that toxic empathy. This is that toxic empathy that you just need to be more hard-nosed, as if the appeal to the heart is all by itself illegitimate. And this is what I've begun to see in parts of the Trump right, is this idea that anything that makes you feel sympathy or empathy for human beings in distress, especially if they're human beings in distress because of the actions of the administration, that's toxic, that's wrong, that's making us weak. But the reality is that if you actually spend much time at all in these spaces, they are desperate for empathy for themselves.
I understand that they're trying to uphold certain beliefs. They might be losing grip on certain members of their audience who say, I can't call myself a Christian anymore because you guys don't embody the love of Jesus. You don't embody the compassion of Jesus. And so they're starting to say, well, you've got it all wrong. What you're calling love, what you're calling compassion, what you're calling the empathy of Jesus, that's not what Jesus had. That's actually not empathy at all. You're mistaking that with a lie from the world, from Satan. Disgusting.
And so part of me is thinking, what's really going on here isn't so much an attack on empathy itself, but sort of a feeling by a lot of people that they've been left out of the empathy calculus. And so feeling neglected, feeling as if no one is caring for their concerns, they're bulldozing the concept itself.
In a world and a culture that seems to be focused on this concept of, because the world hated Jesus first, they will hate Christians as well. They'll hate you because of your love. That if the world hates you, if the world is against you, that means you're doing something right. And that's just not the case. It's almost like they're trying to intentionally bring hate against themselves in some of these cases to like prove their own point. But the reality is, if a group, the most of the world doesn't get along with you, I do think it's time to look at the common denominator. And this isn't all Christians. We're talking about a very specific line of thinking in a very specific aspect of the American evangelical church. So if the shoe doesn't fit, don't wear it. Throw it at somebody else in the head if you need to. But if I'm not talking about you, I'm not talking about you. But I do think that, maybe if you're like, the way that I've used empathy, or maybe I've used toxic empathy before, I would just encourage you to take a second look and go, is it really toxic empathy? What does that term even mean? Or is this just empathy? It feels very performative to hear people talking about empathy, yet showing none. We also see people like Allie, Beth Stuckey, who actually is the author of a book called Toxic Empathy. I've made an entire video on Allie, Beth Stuckey if you guys would like to go check that out and learn more about her. I do need to still do a book review on toxic empathy. Oh my God, I can't bring myself to read it right now because it just pisses me off so much. But I did do a lot of research into her book and then in general, the broader cultural conversation about toxic empathy. She is a leader in this conversation and it doesn't shock me. I think that for somebody, a woman, Christians would say that women are more naturally empathetic. For her to go around and be championing this is particularly toxic, if you will. Here is a little reading from Allie's book. I think this is just the excerpt. This is posted from USA Today of her book, but it does really break down the thought process, so I wanted to read it to you. It says, "A sharp Christian voice makes a bold argument. When politics are driven by empathy rather than truth, innocent people pay the price. We are told that empathy is the highest virtue, the key to being a good person. Is that true? Or has empathy, like so many other words of our day, tolerance, justice, acceptance, have been hijacked by bad actors who exploit compassion for their own political ends? In Toxic Empathy, Allie Beth Stuckey argues that empathy has become a tool of manipulation by the left-wing activists who bully people into believing that they must adopt progressive positions to be loving. She explores the 5 most heated issues through which toxic empathy is deployed: abortion, gender, sexuality, immigration, and social justice. So this is why, you guys, throughout this video, I focus on race. We talk about sexuality. We talk about those topics because this is where they're really targeting. This isn't actually them saying we need empathy done in the right way. This is them saying these groups of people don't deserve empathy, and when you give them empathy, that goes against our political goal. So to continue on reading this, it says, progressives use catchy mantras to represent their perspective as empathetic, like abortion is healthcare, love is love, or no human being is illegal. But in each case, they ignore the other side of the moral equation. All right, we're not going to get into this too much more. I'm not going to read more of your book, but you guys can understand that this really truly is the focus. And I don't want to say that Allie is necessarily leading the conversation here, but I would say that she is the loudest voice when it comes to it. And it's particularly upsetting to me that she is targeting women as a woman, saying that women are empathetic naturally and that we need to keep this in check, and that if you are empathetic towards these specific groups of people, that you aren't really loving them. You aren't really showing them empathy. You're actually holding their hand while you're walking them down to the gates of hell.
This high of, because we're actually winning the battle against the trans insanity. And sometimes you get a little complacent. You think, well, we've won, but we haven't won. There's still a lot. There's still a lot that needs to be done. The other thing too is that we know about the trans activists that they're never going to let this go. They can't let it go. In many cases, they've literally given their lives to this delusion. And then you have parents who've given their children up to it, tragically. And so they're going to hang on to it forever. And so that means the fight continues.
Excellent. Do you have any advice for citizens who are looking to stay engaged in that fight and how they might be able to impact their legislators?
Yeah, well, I mean, reach out to your legislators. Let them know how you feel. Let them know how important this issue is to you. So that's a big thing. But then also just in your everyday life, I think living according to what you know is true and not cooperating with delusion and falsehood, even in the name of being polite. One of the ways that the trans insanity in particular was able to grab this kind of stranglehold on the culture is not because people believed the claims that the trans actors were making. It was more just they were playing on a person's false sense of like compassion, where they feel like, well, I got to go along with it.
Yeah, like toxic empathy.
Right, toxic empathy is a good way of putting it. And I think that starts to be, that's waning. That sense of we have to be polite to these people is waning, which is good. But I think to just keep that up is...
This screenshot from her book, Allie says, but empathy and kindness are not synonymous, and neither are empathy and compassion. Kindness describes how we treat someone, either in word or deed. Compassion means to suffer with someone who's struggling. Both kindness and compassion are necessary components of love, but empathy literally means to be in the feelings of another person. Empathy by itself is neither loving nor kind. It's just an emotion. Love, on the other hand, is a conscious choice to seek good for another person. What this is implying is that you know what is better for another person than they know for themselves, and therefore your love might not feel good to them, but it's still love. I don't think we know how to love people better than they know how to love themselves unless there's something like significant going on. This continues to say, the erroneous conflation of love and empathy has convinced the masses that to be loving, we must feel the same way they do. Toxic empathy says we must not only share their feelings, but affirm their feelings and choices is valid, justified, and good. Wild. It feels like they're shifting the marketing from fire and brimstone, our country is going to end, to saying that our own empathy is making us too soft, that men are feminized, and that is going to be the downfall of our country.
Some conservatives also argue that women are especially susceptible to being misled by appeals to empathy, often when it comes to helping people who are suffering or in need. Joe Rigney said he believes women are more naturally empathetic, which makes them better nurturers. Rigney says they're also more likely to reject church teachings they see as lacking compassion.
And in that kind of context, the empathetic sex is ill-suited precisely because of the ways that empathy could be manipulated into, say, refusing to draw lines or in the name of helping a oppressed group, we're going to abandon our biblical confession or something like that.
David French, meanwhile, says the idea that women are uniquely vulnerable to manipulation ties in closely with Christian nationalism, the idea that Christian men should run the country.
And so you do have quite a bit of literature in the far right, the Christian nationalist right, that is decrying what they see as a, quote, feminized church, feminized political discourse. They say that America is a gynocracy, is what they will call it. And that empathy element is a part of their argument.
That because we have confused empathy with soft boundaries and poor morals, that we are going to fall away from God. And I genuinely think it's upsetting because it gives the church a bad name. And like I've said multiple times throughout this video, I don't believe that this really does reflect the heart of the majority of Christians. But these are loud voices on Fox. These are loud voices in Christian culture. And non-Christians do see that. They notice that.
She says, the popular idea is that homosexuality isn't a sin because Jesus never said it, but this argument is illogical, a misrepresentation of Jesus and a misunderstanding of Scripture. It's illogical because the absence of condemnation doesn't equal support. Just because we don't see Jesus mentioning homosexuality by name doesn't mean he supported it. Jesus says also, Jesus' words aren't limited to what we read in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The entire biblical canon is his. It's all authoritative and without error. So yes, Scripture does clearly and unequivocally condemn homosexuality as sin, despite baseless claims to the contrary.
You can't quote Jesus for this because the only sexual sins Jesus ever condemns are adultery and dumping your wife. That's it. She can't do it. She doesn't follow Jesus. What she's doing here is a couple things. Number one, she's lying because Allie Beth Stuckey does not believe in Leviticus. She does not live by Leviticus. She does not obey or follow or respect what Leviticus commands. Leviticus is a rule book given to the Jews after they escaped bondage in Egypt and didn't realize they were about to spend 40 years in the wilderness with no Wi-Fi access or antibiotics or air conditioning. And it's God giving a lot of rules about how to keep your tribe's numbers up while still being devout. It's all about kosher diet, which I don't think is she kosher? Does she actually live by a kosher diet? Does she never eat ham? Because that's not allowed. You're also never allowed to tattoo the flesh. Men can never cut their hair at the temples. You've got to be an Orthodox Jew here. I didn't realize Allie Beth Stuckey was Orthodox Jewish. Leviticus commands you to stone to death anybody who works on Saturdays. Leviticus commands you to stone to death children who are gluttons or drunks. Deuteronomy says that if a man rapes a virgin, he's got to marry her. These are things. Deuteronomy also says if a woman is not a virgin on her wedding night, the whole town has to gather together and stone her to death. Is this what Allie Beth Stuckey is believing and fighting for? Because she wants to use Leviticus to attack the gays. But Leviticus 20:10 commands you to stone adulterers to death.
And for people that didn't grow up in the church, you don't know if it is everybody or if it's not everybody. You don't know if it's just evangelicals or if it's every denomination. You don't know. You don't know. And it's hard. But it is upsetting to me, and I do think more Christians should be upset about the way that they're being represented by these so-called Christian figureheads who are just podcasters. I'm not even a Christian, and I think that I, try to at least give you guys a better light and view and the benefit of the doubt. Then you've got people like Allie Stuckey, who she's like, don't give us the benefit of the doubt. We're everything that you said we are.
You were accused of being a white supremacist, of being a racist, and the worst thing ever, being unempathetic. And the best example of this is the issue of race, because I see even Christian conservatives abandon all reason and all logic and all commitment to objective reality and adopt narratives and ideas that are simply not true, which leads to theological claims that are not biblical. So whenever there is a police shooting of a Black man, we are expected to not just immediately express sadness, which I think is justified and fine, but we are also expected to express outrage, and not just outrage, but outrage about this obviously being a racist and unjust event. So your empathy and love are measured on social media by how quickly you attach this incident to white supremacy, systemic racism, and the problem with policing in America. It's not enough, as we saw after the whole Black Square saga after George Floyd in 2020. It's not enough just to say, hey, this person is made in the image of God. Hey, this incident doesn't look like it was justified. It looks like it could have been an instance of injustice. That, hey, this person has value and dignity and worth, and they weren't treated that way. And I think that is wrong. You learn very quickly that that is not enough by the rage mob and the racial social justice activists on social media. You learn very quickly that you have to go beyond that you have to say that this is part of a grand racist scheme and system, and that you have to work to dismantle and reform the system, because it's not enough to be not racist. You have to be anti-racist, which means you have to work to break down the institutions and systems that have caused this kind of thing to happen. You're not allowed to say that this was an isolated incident or that you care about it because you care about people in general. You have to latch on to whatever the mainstream narratives say about race in order to be called empathetic, and because we have been conditioned to believe that empathy is a fruit of the Spirit, which it's not, and it's the foremost characteristic that Christians should try to emulate, which it isn't, then we just find ourselves agreeing with what the loudest and angriest and most dramatic people on social media say that we should agree with.
Just double down on it. And it's upsetting to me, because part of the reason that I make this channel is to show people this kind of, bridge the gap between the religious and secular worlds. And then I feel like you've got religious people like Allie Stuckey who could not be trying to do more of the opposite. Like, they want there to be more of a divide. They want people to not understand each other at all.
I know that I'm not the only person who has parents who they just slowly lose year by year. I'm watching my father get more and more extreme, to the point that I don't know him. There's so many well-meaning comments on my last video talking about conservative parents, with people saying yeah, don't never give up. I bring my dad to drag brunch now, and those things are great. And I know people don't mean anything by them, but it's that I don't think that will ever be a reality for me, especially with where my dad is, and I have to think about the lines that I need to draw myself about whether or not what's his access to me like. I have to hear a man who used to be relatively normal, definitely very right-leaning, but not completely incoherent, and now he's looking me in the eyes and telling me he's willing to bear arms against his brothers in a civil war, and I'm I don't know how to have a conversation with that. And it's just there's no rational conversation. There's nothing I can say that will convince him. And it's all right, well, great, then I'll make my lines in the sand of we don't talk about these things. And then what? Don't know what level of brainwashing has to happen for you to see your child and say enemy of the state. That's a real unironic thought.
It is upsetting, and I'm surprised that more Christians aren't upset about it as well, and just about the kind of PR that's going on out there. You would think that these people, when they talk about God, they would take it a little bit more seriously. Even in college, when people would ask me if I was a Christian, I was a Christian in college, but I would a lot of times tell people no, because I wasn't living in a Christian way, and I didn't want to, I felt the weight of representing Jesus. And I'm not saying this is the right way to think about it. If you're, drinking in college, a normal college student amount, I don't think you have to, say I'm not a Christian anymore. But I just carried the weight of that.
The world measures our love by how quickly and how passionately, how emotionally we react and repeat mainstream left-wing talking points about racial and social justice.
What do you guys think about all of this? Do you think that this concept of toxic empathy is racist? Is it sexist? Is it homophobic? Or do you think that they're right? Do you see their point?
Yes, they don't follow Jesus. They worship power. They fight for conservative Christian power, not for anything Christ said.
I would love to hear about it in the comments below. And if you have any other video ideas, please let me know. I have not been feeling too great lately, so I'm just trying to catch up on videos right now, but I definitely do write down all of your ideas, take them seriously. If you guys want to support me even further, being a member to the channel is the best way to do that. I do post more personal videos there, talk about more things in my personal journey, and genuinely, if you guys ever comment on those videos, the members only videos, and ask me personal questions, I'll probably make a video talking about it there. I just don't do that on the broader channel. So if you're interested in that, that is the best way to support me. You will get more responses on comments and a few other things. You can go check it out. You'll get access to videos earlier than everyone else. And yeah, you're kind of part of that group where I really do take your opinion pretty seriously. I have about 40 channel members right now, so it's not a huge crew of you guys. And yeah, you guys are like the hive mind right now that's, helping me talk through this stuff, giving me feedback early on and helping me make adjustments. So thank you so much to my channel members who are already there. And if you would like to support me further, that is the best way to do that. If you made it this far, please like this video, hit subscribe or double check to make sure that you are subscribed if you're not already, and drop a comment below. If you want to comment but you don't know what to say, you can always leave a bird or a dove in the comments below because that's my logo, and I'll leave a white heart probably in response. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I'm just particularly thankful, first of all, with it being Thanksgiving, over the last week, for this channel and for the community that we've created here, and for, frankly, the financial support this channel gives me, especially while I'm sick and not feeling well. I do deal with a lot of just kind of health problems that I'm trying to get figured out, and yeah, I just can't tell you how big of a difference being able to do work like this makes for me. So thank you so much. Thank you for taking a chance on a small channel. I only started this about 7 months ago, and I will not be quitting anytime soon. So yeah, thank you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one.
If I were leading a youth group, I'd all get them all fasting and all getting dreams from God, because when you fast, you start receiving dreams and revelation from God. Father, I pray for the grace of fasting on a young generation like Daniel's generation, that will get revelation and make them the head and not the tail in this nation.
1, 2, 3. Hey God, it's us back at it again with another Thanksgiving. So we just want to say thank you for bringing us back together this Thanksgiving. We want to thank you for everything that you have done, that you haven't done, and that you have yet to do. So we bow our heads, a bunch of liars, deceivers, and manipulators. What? I'm not done.
Shirley, I'm out of this. I'm not doing this. Here, come on.
I'm not done.
Okay, let her go ahead. Go ahead.
Like I said, we bow our heads, a bunch of liars, deceivers, and manipulators. And we say thank you, Lord, for bringing us together. And now we will beg and ask that you bless the hands that made this food. Throw your hands up in Jesus' name. Amen.